Okay. So when you come in every day, we talked last time about saving our Maya preferences. We created that folder on the P drive, right? On mine, it's the D drive. But you have that Sarcona F17 or whatever your name is. Inside there, you have a 2018 folder. That 2018 folder is your preferences. So before you open Maya, not after you've opened it, but before you open it, you want to copy that 2018 and you want to paste it back into your Maya folder. Delete out the old 2018 that's there and paste in the new 2018. There we go. Okay. Once you've done that, then you can open up Maya. And you can open up Substance Painter. So we're just going to continue on from where we left off last class and just seeing what else we can do to this thing. If we were working in Cinema, typically what we would do is just go to File, Open, start working on our project. Because of how Maya works, keeping everything nice and organized, do you remember last time we created that project folder, right? Okay, so Maya needs to know that we're working on that project. It may already know that, it may have forgotten that. Regardless of what it has done, we still want to make sure that every single day we come in, we set our project. So in Maya, you're going to go to File, and if you look at the nearest bottom, you'll see Set Project. Okay, and under File, Set Project, all you have to do is click on your project folder, nothing else, and then hit Set. Okay, so what this does is it tells Maya, I'm working on this project, so all of my textures are going to be in these folders. All of my scenes are going to be in these folders. When you render stuff out, they go in these folders. Okay? Do not go into the folders. This is what some people will do. They will go into that folder, and then they will try to go into their scenes folder, and then they will try to open up their project that way. You can't do it that way. You just set it right to that folder, that main folder, and hit Set. Okay? Especially if you're working back and forth between here and home, that Set Project folder is going to be in a different spot. You may not have a P drive at your home computer, or whatever drive you're working off of. Then you can go to Open. Then you should see your file right there. All right, ignore the texture. Let's reset this back to default. All right, so that's where we left off inside of Maya, okay? Now, if we jump back to Substance and we reopen that file, new way to select a project. There we go. 2520. So much clicking going around. Fancy. Alright, so this is where we left off. Now I'm going to backstep it. I'm going to close this out just to kind of walk you through what we've already done in this process. Okay? So you stay where you're at. If you need to take notes, take notes. I'm just going to hide this weird cube thing. Oh, I forgot my shelf. Stupid shelf. So we started off making a cube way back in Maya. We took the two ends of the cube. We remembered that we're in Maya and we have to use Maya hotkeys. There we go. We extruded opposite sides. Then we took this face and that face and we went to bridge and that bridged those together. Okay, that was the extent of our modeling on this. The only reason we did a shape like this is just so that we have a little bit more detail in our shape. That was it. Okay, I could have used a cube. This process works the exact same way. Okay, I could have made a human. Process works the exact same way. So I have my cube. I need to lay out the UVs. So I go to my I go to my UV editor. There we go. I turn on my texture, so I want to see the checker map. I hide it in here because that's freaking annoying. There we go. And what are the two things that we're looking for, or a couple things we're looking for on this? Right, so we want to make sure that the checkerboard is the same size regardless of where it's at. What else? They don't necessarily have to be touching each other. Right. For the most part, the edges, all the edges don't have to be connected. We just want to make sure we have as few pieces as possible. That definitely helps. The other big thing is making sure that they're all square, right? So if any part of this is not square, like that, that's a no-no. Okay, so that's something that we definitely have to fix. Obviously, this is like crazy. So what we did is we laid out the UVs. Now, as this is a pretty basic square cubish shape, it was very easy just to do an automatic mapping that automatically did all that stuff for us, right? So we just went to UV, automatic. We said 6 planes, that seemed like a good amount. Into square, 512 seemed fine, project. Okay, so now we have squares all over the place. Nothing crazy here, so that should be good. Minimizing the number of pieces I have, I can grab these edges in the middle and do a move and sew. And that puts them together. And then what I wanted to do was just kind of offset these a little bit, just so they're not right on the edge. Okay, I don't like things right on the edge. I like to give a little bit of buffer there. I could even give them a little bit more room this way, maybe a little bit more room that way. Okay, so there was our initial shape, all laid out with the UVs. Wonderful. We exported it as an OBJ. Okay, so we had to have an OBJ in order to get into Substance, otherwise we couldn't do it. I'm going to go and close this and go to New. So we selected our low-res cube. That's what we called it. We chose from here. Oops. I'm in the wrong version. Substance Painter. I think it's that one. They got rid of the 2, which is confusing. There you go. This is 2017. And remember, you can download Substance for, I think it's 180 days. You can get a license for it. So if you want to play with it more, definitely do that. Alright, there we go. And notice too, look at it, laid it out nicely. So I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to go to Select my geometry again. And for this one, we chose the PBR Metallic Roughness HQ Allegorithmic. Allegorithmic is who makes the software, so that's why they're calling it that, I'm assuming. The Metallic Roughness means we're basically going to be creating a metal surface that is basically just like reflective and shiny. The one that's above it, this one that says Metallic Roughness Alpha, if we were trying to create something that maybe had metal and glass to it, that's where we would use like the alpha. So it actually embed like a transparency map to it. Okay, so this is a pretty good one to use. Resolution was 2048. We hit OK. All right, our controls are the same as Maya, so we can zoom in and out so we can see it. We went over here to Bake Texture. We chose, see, there's that button I was talking about. There should be a Use Low Poly as High Poly Mesh. That's what I wanted to click. We hit Bake. And then what this does is it goes through and figures out what these maps are supposed to look like. What does the ambient occlusion of it? What is the curvature? Basically, it's analyzing the surface to figure out what kind of surface we have. If we had something with a lot more parts to it, you'll see, it will pick up all these little intricacies. Now, the idea with this is that you have a low polygon one and a high polygon one. The high polygon one has a bunch of detail that we can transfer into the low one, okay? So imagine a brick wall, something like this. Instead of actually having to model out each one of these bricks, I could have a high model that looks like this. It looks wonderful. But when I render it, what I want to do is just see the brick. I don't need to have all the polygon detail because that'll take forever to render out. Okay? So that's the idea with some of the stuff we're going to be doing. All right, so here is our initial stuff. If I hit B, I can cycle through all the different maps that it created. There's the ambient occlusion. There is the curvature one. You can see it's just subtle because there really isn't a bevel on here or anything. It's just like that little edge. There's the position pass, and then there's the thickness. And that's it. Okay. So we did that. And then we went to Smart Materials, and we drug on one of these ones. Like I said, I like that yellow one. I'm just going to grab this copper worn one. Okay. So now what it's doing is it's taking the information that it just collected by baking them, taking these properties in this copper worn, and combining it together to give us this look. We can go into each one of these areas, and we can still control things. Like if I click on this dirt, click on this mask, I have a bunch of sliders here that I could then go through and, let's say, up the contrast of it. Now this is just upping the contrast on the dirt itself, not the entire texture. Okay, so I think I probably did too much. You can't even see it now. There it is. So it's subtle. Let's find one that's a little bit more obvious. Probably this worn. Yeah, there we go. So I grab this worn texture, grab the mask, and then I could take the contrast up on that. And you really see that contrast kind of coming through on here to give it that look. Now if I turn off my 3D or my 2D view, which is this, and just look at the 3D, pull that down, you'll notice that there is a reflection in here, right? You can see the reflection on kind of the gold parts and the copper parts. And then the area where there's these like scuff marks, there is no reflection. That's the best part about this, is because of how it generates all these, we don't have to go through and paint a bunch of maps or edit a bunch of maps. It's creating all these things for us all at once. So I hit B before to cycle through all the different bake maps that it created. If I hit C, it's going to show me all of the actual maps that it's building. Okay. Now these are the things that we would bring from Substance into Maya in order to get our Maya model to look like this. Okay. So if I hit C, this is base color. So this is going to be the default color of my item. So just like in Cinema, you would take your color channel of your color image of your cereal box, and you would drop it onto that color area. That's what we're seeing now, just like what is the color of this item. Here's the height. So this is actually like the thickness or the bump of it. There isn't anything. It's just flat, okay? Here's the roughness. So where we look at that reflection and how it's not crystal clear, that's what we're seeing here. This roughness is what's making it super rough in these areas. Okay, so wherever it's white, it's very rough, meaning that the reflection is not really clear. It's like fuzzed out. Where it's darker, the reflections are going to be sharper. Here's the metallic, so the entire thing is metallic. Here's the normal, and there's the one there. Okay. All right. So that's where we're looking at that. And I think it's actually backwards. Yeah. So the roughness is actually backwards. The white is where it's. Yeah, that's right. Oh, it's really rough. Yeah, that's right. Never mind. Never mind. Okay. So what's cool about this too is that as I'm changing these things, and I'm looking at, let's say, the roughness, I could actually go into the roughness only and just adjust what the roughness looks like. Okay. So just to show you, I'm going to go. Here's my one layer. I'm going to make a brand new one. Add a layer. I'm going to go to my brushes here. And then down in this area, this is where it shows what I'm painting. So I don't know if I need to kind of move this around so you can see it better. I don't think that helps at all. I guess I'll just put it here but on top. That makes more sense. I'll scoot this down. Okay. Good, you can see it. Alright, so way down here under material, you see where it says color, height, rough, metal, normal. Okay? Those are all the channels right now that I would be painting. If I just went in here and started painting, that's what it's going to start painting. I only want to paint for this little demo, I only want to paint my roughness. So I'm going to turn off everything else. Now down here, this is what I'm setting my roughness value to be. So as I go in here and I say I'm going to crank this up to super white, and I'm going to go into this. Let me find a spot. There we go. Okay, so this area that's really dark, I'm going to make that very, very rough. Okay, so what that means is when I hit M, look at what that area now looks like. It's super rough, so that means that there's a reflection, but that reflection is so blurred you can't really see it. Okay, now if I switch this back to black and I start painting it, okay, now that's gone away. Now as I spin around, look how it's like crystal clear. Okay, more like a mirror. Okay, now I can do that for every single channel. The idea is that you want to put these things together so that they make more sense than just, you know, painting it like this. We can also do, let me turn the roughness off. I'm going to turn the height on, and I'm going to pull this up. So what's going to happen now when I start painting on the height, it's actually going to start giving it depth. It's going to make it look like it has some thickness and some bump to it. So as I paint here, now that isn't actually bumping the surface out, it's just making it look like it's bumped out. Okay, as I spin around, you can see it's not bumped, but it looks like it. Now if I take this height from this whiter area and I pull it to the other whiter area and I start painting, now it looks like it's dipped in. Right? So one area looks like it's bumped out, the other area looks like it's pushed in. And as I go through my maps now, here's my roughness. So you can see the black where I painted. The height did not affect that at all. Here's my metallic, nothing really there. Here's my normal, nothing really there. Here's my normal plus height plus base normal, which is like my height map. Okay? So that's what's going to give us some depth to these things. It's important to know what each one of these things is going to be doing, because it's how you make stuff look more realistic, right? Color is exactly color. So if I go in here and I just pick red, I go like that, there we go, it's red. Okay. Now what's cool about that, because I'm just painting color, all the stuff that's underneath it for roughness and height map and all that other stuff, they all follow through. They all come through still. So I don't need to adjust it because I painted it red. All of the other things, all these other maps are still exactly where they were. So if I needed to just have like spray paint on here that just kind of blends in with it, I could do that. Okay. And what's also neat about this, okay, see where it says base color, uniform color, right? We also have this area up here that says stencil. Inside of substance, there's a whole bunch of these like alpha channels. There's a whole bunch of textures. Where's those other ones? Yeah, tools. Here's those particle ones. They do work. I don't know what was going on with the demo in class, but they do work. There's different masks, procedural textures. Okay, so I could actually use these in my stuff. I could also go online, grab more of these, because ZBrush uses the same black and white images, so I could grab those. I could make my own if I needed to, whatever. So let's say I grab these fingerprints. So I'm going to grab the fingerprints. I'm going to put them into, you'll see if I drag it over base color, it shows it up there. If I grab it over stencil, it shows up there. Okay. So now, here's the hand. And so if I just turn this around, and I just start painting, there you go. So now we have these handprint right there, based off of a stencil. Or I can go with something like this. And there are settings for this too under display settings. Viewer settings, there they are. Stencil opacity. We could take the opacity down so we can actually see it. Yes, you can. You can just pop one on there. So this is what the stencil does. Oh, there we go. You can also take the number off. Length. What was that? We could also drop this onto just uniform color. And now when I go boop, there it is. Okay, now it's picking up the color from the actual image itself. So if I wanted a red circle, I would go grab red and drop it on there. Okay, but it's not just for color, this applies to all of them. So if I went back to the stuff that I'm painting here and I said I want to do color and height, I'm going to pull this up a little bit. There we go. Now it looks like that flower decal is actually like a 3D item on that surface. Okay, so that's the idea with doing that. Now all the stuff I'm doing here is generating a texture map. Okay, the whole goal of this is that we're creating a texture map that we would then bring back into Maya to put on our object to make it look realistic inside of our scene. So we wouldn't bring an entire scene into Substance. What we would do is we would bring individual objects into it and then bring all those textures back into Maya, and then we would have our entire scene. Okay, now the next stage of this, I'm just going to delete this. This is another thing that's cool. I just delete that layer and everything's back to normal. Is that we can actually bring in, like I said, high-res geometry and get that detail and apply it to a low-res geometry. Okay, so let's jump back to Maya real quick. And we're going to tweak this surface some. Okay, so on your model, what we're going to do is we're going to add in just a seam going down the middle. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen seams on products and whatever else. Basically just like a little dip that's going to go around the inside of it. Okay, so what we need to do is add a division going down the center of this. So in Cinema we had the knife tool. In Maya they broke it up into several different tools. Okay, so one of them is called the multi-cut. That's where I could draw individual lines. We would actually want to use this insert edge loop tool, which is going to add a loop all the way around. Okay, so go to your insert edge loop tool. And if you don't want to see this checkerboard, you can just go to the UV editor and turn it off if you are seeing it and you don't want to see it. There you go. I don't want to see it. And what you're going to do is just click and drag on an edge going this way. Shift right click. Remember we have that hotkey. And then you go to the edge loop, insert edge loop. So basically you want to put two edge loops close to each other, just like that. Shift. It's with the other one probably, yeah, multi-cut. Now it's weird. I'll try that again. Yeah. What's up with that? Why did it do that? It is trying to play tricks. Yeah, because Maya. We'll go with that. It's going to drive me crazy now. It was moving my surface. I don't know why I was doing it. It's moving my surface. Okay. Insert edge loop. We click on an edge going the opposite way we want to put an edge in. Okay? That's all we have to do. Cinema makes it a bit more complex. There's options that we have to set. We have to be in a certain mode. Maya is not like... Okay. So I'm going to go to my move tool. So I hit W. I go to faces. And I'm just going to click, shift, double click that one. Okay. So I click one, hold down shift, double click the next one. It loops all the way around. And then I'm going to extrude it. So I hit Control E. And then just push it in. Remember how tight that curvature was? How it was like really like blocky and like really tiny? We want to have a little bit more detail there. So we want this surface to actually have some softness to it. Okay? So we're going to add a bevel to the entire thing. Typically you don't add a bevel to the entire thing, but because of the kind of surface that this is, we're going to do that. So I'm going to right click, make sure I'm in object mode, and then click on it. Then under Shift right click button again, I can go to Bevel. I may have lied, and I did. It's not under there. Under Edit Mesh, I'm going to go to Bevel. Okay, so make sure the object's selected. Go to Bevel. One is probably a good number. So for mine, I'm just setting it to a fraction of 1 and segments of 2 in that little box that pops up. Okay. So we actually have to relay out the UVs for this object. Okay. Now the cool thing is, because we already laid it out on the other object, that we don't have to go back and mess with it. Okay. We don't have to mess up with the other one. Now before we go on, do a file save as. And call it cube02 or something. If for some reason we need to go back to the original cube, we can't now because we've added loops, we've extruded, we're going to be doing bevels, or we did a bevel, and then we're going to be laying out the UVs. So in case we have to go back, we have it saved. So going back to the UV editor, okay, now it looks like the UVs are already laid out for it, right? Right, they're not. It's lying to us. I'm going to turn my checker map on, and if we look right here, look what happened to my nice squares. You see how ugly that is now? Ugh. All right, so we don't want to do another automatic mapping. See how many pieces we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces. Just watch what happens when I do automatic on mine. Same settings. Project. Holy cow. It's like a whole bunch of pieces here. Another one there. This is broken off. That's broken off. These two are broken off. These are all broken off. That's broken off. Okay. What it does with automatic mapping, if something is facing this way, it projects it this way. If something is facing this way, it projects it that way. When you have a surface like this, it basically splits it. So some are going to get this, some are going to get that. When you have a change in direction, it does a different one. So what happens is when you have these like little pockets and little bevels, it's projecting upwards to this side, downwards to that side, left ways to this one, and right ways to that one. Okay? It's a lot of stuff. Because we already have this kind of base laid out, all we have to do is tell it to re-lay out the UVs or re-unfold them. Okay? So we're going to right click and go to UV Shell, marquee all of your pieces. Okay, right click, UV Shell, marquee all the pieces. Then we're going to shift right click. Remember, it knows what we have selected. Okay, so I hold down shift, I right click, and I'm going to go to unfold and then unfold option box. Make sure you go to the option box. Okay. How Maya unfolds stuff from this point is that it's actually going to look at the surfaces and just stretch them out. Okay. It's going to try to figure out what the best way to do that is. So if we leave this at unfold 3D, I think yours looks the same as mine. Yes. Okay. All I have to do in here is change my map size. Trevor, under right click, unfold, unfold option box, or shift right click. Yep, right there. Alright, we'll be right back there in a second. So map size 4096, and then hit apply. If you didn't have two segments under your bevel here, it was trying to smooth it a little bit too much and kind of creating this parallelogram or rhombus or whatever you want to call it. Trapezoid. Alright, so it's going to offset them a little bit. But the idea here is that if I zoom in on that spot now, it looks nice and smooth coming into here and not jaggedy. Okay? It's very subtle what it's doing, but it's actually taking all of the vertices and kind of moving them so that we do have squares all over the place. That's the goal of that, okay? Now, these are not lined up perfectly, so what we have to do is go to UV shell. Oops, come on. There we go. And just rotate them so that they're nice and neat. And I would recommend just doing them individually. Don't try to grab them all and do the same thing. Some are going to go one way, some are going to go another way. Alright, so that should be good. We kind of lined them up so that they are working correctly. Now, if for some reason we did that unfold, maybe one of the boxes or one of the sides got smaller or bigger, just pretend that did that, okay? It could happen. Maya's unpredictable at times. We need to fix that. Now, we could grab this, click it, and try to scale it up to get it as even as possible. That's definitely something we could do. You could get real close to these edges here, and what I do is line up one of these boxes like this. I would scale it down, and then I would constantly be moving this to see if my sizes are close. Okay, and you can see that it is pretty close. Okay. The other thing we can do is grab all of our stuff. We don't need to do this for this one. I'm just showing you for later assignments. And then typically what I do is I'll unfold something just like we did, and then I'll go to layout. And what layout is going to do is it's going to figure out all these pieces that we have, what is the common size that they should be. Okay, what is the unfolding? You could have a surface unfolded perfectly, but this piece is huge, this piece is tiny. Okay. It doesn't look at that kind of stuff, but layout does. So I'm going to tell it that my resolution is 4096, just like we picked from the unfold menu. I'm going to tell it that I want to do a pre-scaling using my 3D ratios. Tell it my texture size again, and then I give it a little padding. So you know how we offset all of our maps so they were kind of inset? That's what the padding is going to do. One of them will offset it inward. The other one will make sure there's a little margin around each one of our areas. So this is 5 pixels. I could do 10 pixels or whatever. Okay. Typically 5 is good enough, but if you see that sometimes you're getting some bleeding from one texture to another, you may want to increase that. So now I hit layout. It's going to take a minute to think, but what should be happening is that it should be going through. You can see the process down here. It relays them out. Okay. Now, it doesn't do any rotation, but it does lay them out and give you that nice little border around here. Okay. Now, you'll also notice that mine are probably in a different order than they were before. That doesn't matter going to the next step. Okay. When we take this into Substance, it doesn't care. All right. All right, cool. So now what we're going to do is just delete the history on this object. So if you have it in your shelf, because you're lucky and you didn't hide your shelf, then you can just click on that button. Otherwise, you'll delete by type history. And then you're going to file export it, the selection, as a high-res cube. Okay, make sure it's set to OBJ, export selection, high-res cube. All right, then once you have that, we're going back into Substance Painter. Okay. Now, once we're in Substance Painter, what we're going to do with this is simply apply that high-res mesh to this mesh. Okay, so if you have your mesh already open, you're perfectly in the right spot. If you don't, obviously open it. So remember, we had that option of choosing a high-res mesh when we went to Bake Textures. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, is click on that Bake Textures button again. And instead of clicking on, in this case, use the low poly for the high poly, you're going to uncheck that if you checked it like I did. Then you're going to click on this little new button here and find your high-res cube. Now, if you had multiple cubes or multiple meshes already in there, because we loaded our low res too, you would click on the low res and then say minus to get it out of there. Okay, so if I had one in here, I could just minus it out and then add the high res in there. Okay, once you have that, just hit bake again. So the model is still the same model. It's still that low-res model, but now we have this piece of detail that came over from the other one. Okay? So what's neat about that is that we can basically come into this, do a bunch of stuff to this object, come back into Substance, and now all that information will be sealed into it. Okay? So you remember stuff like our drone assignment where we had to go through and model in lights and model in seams and model in all this stuff? Wouldn't it have been cool just to be able to have like a high-res one that has all that stuff and our low-res one we render out? Amazing. Now, it looks kind of ugly, definitely. I'm going to hit B on mine just so we can see. All right, my thickness map is nothing to, nothing fancy. My ambient occlusion, that looks pretty ugly, okay? And I'm pretty sure that a lot of this information is coming from the ambient occlusion, the curvature you can see, thickness, normal, okay? So it's all kind of a mix of all these things is where that information is coming from. So I'm going to jump back to my Bake Texture button, and this is where we can get into more of a customizing feel for it. So for my ambient occlusion, I may want more resolution on that, or I may want more ambient occlusion just so I have more of an effect. All of these buttons here are these check marks, are things you can just have on. Right now it's generating all of those by default. So if I hit none at the very top, and then I go to the ambient occlusion one, then I can start to specify what this is looking like. So one thing I can do is say the max occluder distance is going up. Okay, now what that means is I have my hand here, I have an object there, okay? It's going to try to generate some ambient occlusion. Now, once I get to a certain point, it starts generating it. Once I get to a certain point, it stops generating it, okay? So the further apart I am, that's that distance. So I basically want to say, I want this ambient occlusion to be more on the screen. So I'm taking it up to 0.34. Seems like a good number. I could also take my secondary raise up to, let's say, 128. And you can type it in if you double click on the number and you type. That works too. Once you have that, anything else? I can also do attenuation smooth. That works pretty good too. That looks good. So I'm going to hit bake. Okay. Now what that does is it bakes out just that one map. So now my ambient occlusion will be updated, and what I should get is a cleaner map that than I had before. Okay. It's going to take longer because we have more rays. We're ambient occluding a little bit further out. So we just have to wait for this to get done. You'll notice that there is these numbers here, right? So you see where it says size 2048 right here. When we were in the bake thing, there was a 2048. When we made a new document, there was a 2048. That's our resolution. Now the idea with Substance is that you work at kind of a lowish resolution, and then right before you export, you would crank it up and then get out a higher resolution. Okay. Let me see my stuff again. Oops. All right, so here's my new ambient occlusion. That looks a lot crisper than it did before. Okay. A little bit of a scuff there, but that's nothing to worry about. Alright, so now I'm going to go back to bake texture and thickness. Okay, I can do the same thing for thickness. I can take this up to maybe like 0.25, maybe even 0.5. Take that up to 0.5 for my occluder's thickness. Take my raise up to 128. 128.5, and then bake that too. Okay, so I can go through and tweak each one of these things. Now, if you don't know what something's going to do, change some settings drastically so you can actually see it and see what it does. So going from 0.1 to 0.5, that should be a pretty drastic change in how much this thickness is doing its thing. You could also, I'm seeing the material here while this is working. So you're not gonna let me? Nope. So I think the older version used to let you click on it still and change the mode so you can actually see the other one, so this one's not. But I could go to the specific one. There's ambient occlusion, there's curvature. Okay. So I can go to the curvature one and I can actually turn it on if I needed to. So I can go to bake texture just to show you. It's not curvature, thickness. Right. There it is. So I can go to thickness here. I can change some settings, and then when I hit bake, I'll be able to see kind of a before and after. Okay, I have to watch for it. I can't just look away, but I can see it. All right, so all of those settings are going to help us generate better maps. Let me hit M again. All right, so it's not looking as chunky as it did when we first started. It's looking a bit better. Okay. So what I want you to do, just for the next 15 to 20 minutes, go back into Maya, play around with extruding, play around with, save your stuff first, save as, add some edge loops, do some extrusions, add some bevels, whatever, unfold your maps, bring it back into Substance, and then just see what you get. For the next 15 to 20 minutes, just play around with it, okay? Just to get used to that process of going back and forth, because we'll be doing that quite often. It doesn't matter what the end result looks like. You could actually, what I would do is hit the undo button until we get to before the bevel. That way you can put the bevel on after everything else is done. Okay, or go back to that original file, add some other stuff to it, and then come back. Alright, so like I said, I wanted you to see on these our limitations. We can't do a whole bunch of different things. We can do subtle things. The brick wall is a good example because we're basically going from a flat surface to just one that has more detail to it. Something like this definitely works. This little seam here, these little bevels here, that works. But if I try to punch a hole in a regular cube or start off with a regular cube, there's no way that that would look as good as I think it's going to look. So we always have to have a good base model in order to move on to the next stage, which is adding those bits of detail. Now, a couple of things that popped up around the room, I just want to show so you can see that, okay? We've kept our UV layout pretty simple, right? We started off with just an automatic mapping. We didn't unfold it a couple times, okay, nothing crazy. When you get into certain areas, you need to do more than just those basic things. So like on this object here, I'm going to do something that's a little bit more advanced, okay? So I'm just extruding. All right, so this surface here, and I'm going to turn this texture off so I don't see that. Okay, so there's no way that I'm going to be able to create a nice UV layout with something like this that has as few pieces as the one we were just looking at, okay? The reason is this piece here and here and here and here and here, all of those are not going to be connected together. Okay, now what I mean by that, let me do this. I'm going to grab these faces here and there, and I'm going to do an automatic. Okay, I can grab individual faces and do just automatics on certain faces. So there those are. I'm just going to shove them off to the side. Remember, this is our work area. We don't put stuff inside the work area until we're ready for it, or we don't, you know, we need to populate it, but I'm working, so just keep it out of the way. All right, so now this one, is all of those. So if I go to this piece here and I say unfold, look at what it did to this piece. Okay. And let me go to my texture now so we can look at the texture, and that just looks like a huge mess. Okay. So our simple cube was simple. That was the whole point of it. I wanted you to be able to see automatic UV mapping, some unfolding, moving pieces around, simple stuff. When we get into something like this, we have to then start thinking, how are we going to take this 3D object and break it up so that we can lay it flat? Okay. In some cases, it's going to be, I need to have 7, 8, 25 different pieces. Ideally, you don't want to have that, but it is what it is. Number one, we have to have square pieces. Okay, so all of these things here should have squares, checkerboards all over them. Number two, they all need to be the same size. Nothing else matters beyond that. If we don't get those first two done, we can't do the next steps. Okay. So I'm not even going to try to lay out anything else until I figure out this one piece. So the way that I need to do that is I need to find ways that I can cut this piece. Okay? So remember going back to that cereal box, how if we cut it along the seam, we could unfold it and flatten it out? That's what we need to figure out with this. So if I, because of experience, I know this, if I go to this edge here and I select this edge and I tell Maya, hey, this is going to be my seam. I want you to use this as your method of how to cut it out and how to flatten it. Okay, so I just double click the edge. I come over here to cut and I say cut. Okay, Shift X, there's a hotkey. Then I grab this and then I go to unfold. Whoops. Now we're getting closer. Okay, now it looks like an odd piece, but there's still something holding this up. Okay, and the thing holding it up is right there in the middle. Right? I still have this tiny square that all the pieces are trying to connect to. Do you see that right here? This square right in the center here. All the pieces are still trying to connect to it. So I'm going to have to break that square off of this. So I'm going to grab all these edges. I'm going to say cut. Cut. And then I'm going to grab this again and go to unfold. Okay? So now we're getting closer. We're not there yet. We're getting closer. I still may need to go through and grab more edges and do more cuts. And then do more unfolding. Do you see how we're now getting closer to having squares all over the place? Okay? So this is something where there's never going to be automatic, boom, it works, perfect, let's go on to the next stage. We want squares. We want them all to be the same size. And we also need them to be as few parts as possible. Okay? Now, just so you can see it, there's all my pieces here. Anything like this, I typically like to do a once over and see. You can kind of see that I'm still getting some warping right here. That doesn't look perfect. Now, what that's going to do when I go into substance is my paint texture is actually going to go one direction, and then it'll actually skew. Okay, so we can't have that. So I need to work on that. Maybe I go here and cut it there. A lot of it's just try it and see. That's a lot of what we're doing. All right, I think I may even need to just cut this all. Just boom, 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 and cut. And grab all these pieces and unfold. Alright, let's see, that piece. And some of these I may need to rework manually. So that one seems fine. That's perfectly straight. This one's weird. That one's weird. I don't know why those two are so weird. Let's try unfolding those again. 4096. You could take the iterations up. What this does is it basically does it again and again and again. So when I put it to 10, it's going to do this thing 10 times trying to find the best result. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it is. Nope. So this one isn't even doing what I want it to do. So in this case, I can just use a planer. And what a planer is going to do is it's going to just project it straight at it. Okay? So just like we did automatic, has 6 planers projecting one from each side. This is just one planer. Boom, straight at it. So I'm going to go to my Z direction, hit project, And look at how nice these pieces now are. Okay. Now you'll see that these aren't separated. It is just one big piece, and that's fine. That's exactly how they can be. This piece here, that's also just one piece. That works out fine too. Now I can grab all of these pieces and grab all of these pieces, and then I could do an unfold just to verify everything's still cool. And then I'll do a layout. Now watch how cool this is. I have different sizes here, different sizes here, probably some different sizes on the inside. 4096, preserve 3D ratios, translates, 4096, 10, 10, 10, whatever. Layout. So now what it's going to do is it's going to take all these different shapes and fit them into that box. Okay? Now, it doesn't rotate, right? So I'm like, oh, son of a... rotate it. You should just know this, Maya, right? So I want this to be rotated like that. So I'm just going to rotate that one so it doesn't look stupid. I'm going to rotate this one so it doesn't look stupid. Rotate that one. There is a way that you can tell it to rotate, but when you do that with the layout, it seems to take like 10 times longer because it's literally like rotating every single piece until it tries to figure out the best position for everything. All right, so that's close enough. Layout again. Boom, that's much better. Okay. Now everything is the exact same size. All my squares are the exact same size. I have the same resolution everywhere. This one is still rotated. It's not going to hurt anything crazy. It's just going to be bothering me if I don't rotate it. There we go. There we go. All right, so now this is perfect. Okay, so now this is ready for me to take into Substance and actually apply and put a texture on top of it. Okay, or if this is a product model, okay, when we have if I had a watch, a watch that I was actually going to render out, I may want to bring the actual full res, high res model into Substance. That way I'm for sure going to get the highest quality texture on these things. Sometimes you don't want to do that and use the low res and the high res. But I may want to lay out or put bevels on this and then do an unfold again. So I would go to my bevels. I would set my segments to 2 at least. Lower that. Go back to here. Whoops. Do my unfold. It bent that one, whatever. Relay these out. Okay, notice how it shrunk everything down. Because it bent that one, everything had to get shrunk down. So again, it's stuff that you have to balance. What is the best way to do these kinds of things? Sometimes even, I don't know if this will happen, but this piece here is pretty close to that piece, right? It's pretty close, but it's not exact. But I think I might get that to be able to work, okay? Also, if we look at this, remember how I was cutting stuff? I was cutting faces or cutting edges. Right here, this edge right here is the same edge. So I could probably just move and sew that. So we did that together on the other one. I just sew it. There we go. All right, so what I'm doing is just optimizing all of my layouts. These are rotated still, so I definitely want to rotate that. At some point, you would think they would just orient shells to edges. Maybe that's it. No. Orient shells. Oh, look at that. Boom, orient shells. Nice. And that's why it's in green, because it's a brand new one. Thank you, Maya, for adding something useful. All right, so now we can go back to layout. And now, look how much better that fits, right? Okay. Now, if everything was squished into one corner, for some reason I had an ungodly, like, huge piece, which could happen, I want to break those pieces up, okay? So just to give you a, for instance, let me duplicate this piece, scoot it over here, and we're just going to take this there and make that really long, like crazy long. Okay, now when I did that, all my UVs also got stretched, right? So I have to go back. I have to go to my shell. I have to, whoops, unfold it. And now there's all my pieces. Again, we're squared. We're not good proportion right now, but we're square. When I go to my layout, what's probably going to happen is I'm going to have a lot of room inside this thing. Because what Maya is going to do is try to fit all of these pieces inside this box. It's not going to cut anything up. So if you look at this, see all this extra room that I have right here? That's just wasted texture space, okay? It may not mean anything to you yet, but when you go through all the work of modeling something and then you bring it into something like Substance or you're rendering it out and the texture is really grainy and just ugly, that's where you're really going to see it. So that's where I would go into this area. Oops. I'd zoom closer so I can actually select it. And I would start grabbing, come on. Oops, I went the wrong way. Oh my god. Oops. I have used Maya before. Let's just try this again. You, there we go. Okay. And then right here, double click, shift double click. Alright, so I'm going to cut these. So that should cut those big pieces. Okay, so now when I cut those, now I do my layout again. I don't need to do an unfold. What should happen is it should take these pieces and it should lay them in a different way. Okay, it should give me more room in there, better usage. That's much better than it was. Not perfect, but it's definitely better than it was. Okay, the other thing we could do is grab all these pieces and, like I just found out, orient shells. Boom, awesome. And we can also do our layout. And I'll show you on this. I'm going to do a rotate shells. There it is. We can rotate them in 90 degrees. 0 to 180 should be fine because they're all squares, so that shouldn't be an issue. Actually, 0 to 90 should be perfect. Okay. And layout. Alright, so now it's going to go through my shell, rotating all these pieces, trying to find the best way to fit all of these in there. Let Maya do its work. If you have a better way to do it, then you can do it, but that's why that tool is there. Okay? Now I could go through, I'll show you this after, because this is a bit more complex surface than we previously had. We still have some room in here, and sometimes there's just going to be nothing you can really do about it. Sometimes you're just going to have room. But the idea here is that we've optimized our UV layout as best we can. Now if we had another object, let's just say for instance this piece here, okay, I could actually take these pieces and these pieces and lay them out together. So if I had a character, I have his upper body, his lower body, I don't have to put each of them on their own UV set. I can actually put them on the same one if I have the space for it. Okay, a high-res movie character, most likely you're going to have a UV set for part of their upper body here, part of their upper body there, part of their lower body here, part of their lower body there. They break them up into crazy things. Okay, that really didn't help at all. That really didn't do anything. Make that a little bit bigger. I tried to resize these to fit that. I'll just ignore that for now. Okay. Alright, so that's pretty good. So now we have perfectly well laid out UVs for this piece. Everything works great. Okay. Now, one more thing that I want to show or two more things I want to show. If I go to the UV editor and I go to, I'm going to duplicate it so I don't ruin this one. There we go. And I go to automatic. It looks like that did an okay job of laying these things out. And I could actually argue that, you know, there's actually less pieces. On this one, it looks like there might be less pieces. Let's see. Usually what they get is these small pieces. Yep, see how tiny these pieces are up here? Sometimes you can clean those up, sometimes you can't. Yeah, so we still have small pieces there. So in this case, the automatic may actually be a better solution than playing with it like that. It doesn't hurt to try automatic to see what it's going to do. Okay. Now the other thing I want to show is if I take a cube and I stretch this out crazy far, and I say, cool, that's what I want my UVs to look like. I'm going to go to UV, I'm going to go to my automatic because it's a cube, and I get this. The UVs did not correct themselves. Okay, see how they're still all stretched out? So what happens is Maya remembers what the surface looked like when it was not scaled. Okay, so before I scaled it, it was square, and that's what it's laying my UVs out like. Okay, so I have to tell Maya to forget about all that. So over here in the channel box, remember where we can change our translates and rotates and scales? It has a scale number of 42. I need to get that 42 back to 1. Okay, I can't just click 1 because then it'll make it a square again. I can't have that. So if I go to modify freeze transform, what it does is it locks in Maya's scale. Okay, so now it's back to 1, back to 0. Now when I do an automatic, now I get this. Okay, now again, looking at this, look at the underutilization of all of those UV space. Okay, so in a case like this, I may actually want to add divisions and then start splitting it apart just so that I have more room being used. Okay, just so you can see that. If I go to my insert edge loop and I go there, kind of roughly estimating how far it is for each one, right? Just like that. And then I'm going to grab all those edges that I just added, and then I'm going to cut them, and then I'm going to unfold this again, and then lay this out again. Okay, so we're basically using like just that much of it. Now look at it. Okay, so now I've, just by adding some extra divisions, I'm utilizing my texture space better. Okay, again, something that may not sound important now, but when you start getting into your textures, you'll see. When you start taking something into substance, you'll see. Let's even do just like a quick little thingy. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to delete out. Actually, I'll just grab this again and just go to automatic. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to export out this piece. Long cube, bad UVs. This one. Alright, so let's go back into substance. I'll discard that. I don't need it. Long cube, bad UVs. Good. Okay, so do the same thing. We'll bake the texture. This shouldn't take terribly long. Click that. Bake. Pretty simple surface, nothing really going on here. Cool. I'll take a smart material and I'll use this machinery one. That's the one I showed you guys before. Okay. So look at the detail here. You can see the grain happening in this. That doesn't look like a very nice material at all. Okay, so now let's go to, there is a weird spot under project configuration. You can just change your model, which is like, I don't know why it's under there or whatever. Low res, a long cube, better UVs, okie dokie. Okay, the UVs are not laid out, so I have to just go, or the baking is not redone, so I'm just going to go back to bake texture. And then once I do, you'll see the huge difference. You'll see how one was super grainy and ugly looking, and then this other one is going to be like, wow. Hopefully it'll be wow. There we go. All right, so there's a very similar spot. So that spot, you can actually see detail in this spot that you could not see before in the other one. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of that, is that we want to be able to have that resolution inside it. Look at this square right there as a Photoshop document. Right now it's 2048 pixels this way, 2048 pixels that way. Okay, so think about how much color and detail you can add to something in one of those small areas. If I zoomed in on one tiny pixel here, which you can't see because there's no pixels in this, if I start drawing, it's going to be like really pixelated. The higher the resolution, the bigger these pieces are, the better packed they are, the higher, the better looking surfaces we can create. Okay, cool. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to then start playing with this. So you have some ideas. You've kind of gone through with the cube one. Scrap the cube one. Make something simple. Doesn't have to be crazy. Just something simple that you could then lay out some basic UVs on and then bring in there. This project is meant to be today for the next 40 minutes and then next class. Okay? It's not meant to be a full-blown thing. Get used to the process. That's all we're doing here. Okay? Just getting used to the process of this. That's it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.